Story 1. I really love Craigslist. I'd estimate I've met maybe 300 people for buying/selling stuff, and for the most part, everyone was nice and harmless. However, I did run into 2 creeps who made me rethink meeting strangers alone to sell stuff. FYI, I was an early 20s female at the time. First guy, it's 2009, and I'm staying with my parents for the Christmas holidays in a small town in Florida. I'm going through my childhood room and cleaning out the closet, and find a giant CD holder full of maybe 100 really shitty CDs. Think Nickelback, Aqua, Chumbawamba. It's the 21st century. No one uses CDs anymore. I figure I'd try to sell the CDs on Craigslist. I put up a listing. 100 CDs from the late 90s and early to mid 2000s, mix of pop and rock. All for $35 OBO. The next day, I get an email from a guy named John around 2 p.m. He says that he's in town temporarily, and that he wants the CDs. He says he can pick them up after dinner around 8 p.m. I email him back my address and number, and tell him to text or call when he's on his way. 8 p.m. comes and goes. I figure I've been stood up, which happens often on Craigslist. No big deal. My dad works for a liquor distribution company, and would often do demonstration nights at restaurants and bars, and would come home at bar closing time. This night, he gets home at around 3 a.m. I'm in college and a total night owl, so I'm still up probably eating junk food, surfing the web, and watching horror flicks. I hear a car pull up, look out the window, and see him sitting in his car eating food. He often stops at Taco Bell on his way home, and eats it in his car, so my mom doesn't know he's cheating on his diet. Maybe 10 minutes later, my dad comes in and shouts my name. Pizza_succubus. There is someone here to see you. Can you please tell me why a strange man is showing up at our house at 3 a.m.? Huh. I go downstairs, and my dad says some guy pulled up in the driveway and asked for me by name. I walk outside with my dad, and this guy who is maybe mid-30s gets out of his car. He says he's the Craigslist guy who wanted to buy my CDs. My dad goes back in the house. I tell the guy it's really, really late to just be stopping by, especially without texting first. However, since I'm awake, I go and grab the CDs. He then proceeds to drone on and on about why he's buying the CDs. He says he's engaged to a woman he loves very much, and all he wants to do is make her happy. He said that last week, someone broke into her car and stole all of her CDs. She was really upset, and he wanted to make it up to her. He looked on Craigslist and found my listing, and was really excited because I had a bunch of the CDs she used to have. Weird thing is, I didn't list any of the artists/bands because I was lazy, but I didn't think about that at the time. Anyway, he said he was getting it for her as a Christmas surprise. He said he was staying with his future in-laws somewhere nearby, and that their family barbecue ran really late, which is why he never made it at 8 p.m. By this point, I've lost interest and say something along the lines of, "That's sweet. Next time, you should probably call or text the Craigslist instead of just showing up." I hand him the CDs, he hands me cash, and I go back inside. 3 days later, I start getting texts from an unknown number. "Hey, I don't know my way around this town. Care to tour guide Winky Face? I could really use a massage. Where can I get a massage in this town? You're Asian. Do you do massage? Would you take $40 for a 1-hour massage? Happy ending? Me finally. Who the fuck is this? Him, oh sorry. I bought the CDs from you the other day. Do you squirt?" I didn't respond obviously. I show my friends that night, and we laugh it off. Then the next day, I get more texts. "I still have your address. I'm at the Bank of America near your neighborhood. I just got the $40, babe, laughing face. Only 3 minutes away. Are you home? You fucker. Stop ignoring me. I'm almost there." I immediately ran downstairs to tell my dad and mom. It was night time, so we shut off all of the lights outside and inside my house. My mom, little brother, and I went in my parents' room in the back of the house. My dad hid behind the curtains of the front bay window with a shovel in his hand. A few minutes later, I heard him run down the front hallway, fling the front door open, and run outside. We heard some faint shouting, so we all walked out of the bedroom. By that time, my dad came back in with his shovel, his face red and his hair all disheveled. Apparently, the guy came driving down our street really slowly. My dad recognized the car and went running outside with the shovel, yelling obscenities at the guy. The guy peeled off and never came back or texted me again. Second guy. I was moving from Florida to DC and was going to load up my car as much as I could with stuff. However, I lived on the 3rd floor plus a bit of a walk from my assigned parking spot, so I figured I could use some help. I posted an ad on Craigslist gigs. I said I was looking for someone to help me load some heavy items like TV, desk, etc. in my car. Less than an hour's worth of work, and I'd pay $45 or whatever. I give the very first responder my number and address, and he shows up. He was probably 5 feet 8 inches and 350 pounds of pure fat. The sweat and smell coming off of this guy in the Florida heat was pretty nauseating, but I didn't care as long as he did the job right. While he was carting heavy stuff, I was loading lighter things. Whenever I'd go upstairs to grab another load, he'd hurry after me so he could walk up the stairs behind me. I had the door propped open, so he didn't have to worry about me needing to unlock the door for him or anything. When he'd follow me up the stairs, he made these weird grunting noises like mmhmm, but I assumed it was because he was out of shape. Eventually, everything's loaded properly, save for some sweat smears on my stuff. I pay him, and he drives off. I go back in my place to finish loading and cleaning. I go out maybe 45 minutes later to put another load in my car, and I see his truck is back, parked across the street from mine. He's sitting in the driver's seat, looking at me. When he sees me notice him, he looks away. I walk over to his window and knock. He rolls it down, and I ask if he needs any help or if he was lost. I was really confused as to why he had come back, and I knew he didn't live near me. He didn't say anything, just rolled his window back up and drove off. I'm okay, whatever. Of course, 5 minutes later, my phone starts blowing up. I don't recognize the number, so I don't answer the calls. Then texts start rolling in. Him, I bet you taste salty and sweet. Me. Who is this? Him, your pussy. Him, what you up to tonight? I can come back over. I get this sinking feeling it's the Craigslist guy. He had never called me about the job when I gave him my number, so I didn't know what his number was. Him, I like your pink panties. Then I realize he was looking up my dress when I was walking up the stairs. I immediately feel like a total idiot for wearing a dress that day. He then started dialing my number over and over again. I didn't know how to do the block number thing through Sprint, so I had to just turn my phone off. Later, I was with my guy friend grabbing a bite and turned my phone back on. I got another text from the guy about how he wanted to toss me around like a rag doll and tie me up and make me beg for it. I show the text to my friend and tell him the story. The Craigslist creep then proceeds to start blowing up my phone again. So my friend answers and says he is going to cut his dick off and feed it to his dog if he ever contacts me again. I moved the next day, so I never had to worry about him randomly showing up in his truck again. Since then, I've bought and sold stuff on Craigslist, but I always make people meet me at a public place. I also stalk people's email addresses, Google Plus accounts, etc. Story 2. I was living in Hawaii and had to move to LA for work. I didn't know anyone, was fairly broke, and my job wasn't going to help with moving expenses, so I resorted to scouring Craigslist for a room for rent. After literally thousands of scams or weirdos, I finally found this amazing girl. She was funny, we had similar interests, and she even worked in the same field as me. She didn't yet have a place, but her and another girl were looking at several houses that required a third roommate. They were totally okay with doing all the work seeing, as how I was an ocean away. She called or Skyped with me about once a week, and sent me pictures of each house they looked at. All in all, she was incredible. Fast forward 3 months. They found a huge and gorgeous house. Everything was settled. The 2 girls, Evan and Juliana, were moved in, and Evan, the original girl from CL, picked me and all my stuff up at the airport. On the ride home, she starts telling me horror stories about her past roommates. Every single one had fucked her over in some horrendous way, and she was terrified of being close to people after that. She said she wanted us to be the people who turned that around for her, that she wanted us to be a little family. She then drove us not to the house, but to a nearby Starbucks where she chain smoked and told me about her stepdad who was in AA, and how she'd briefly been attending NA meetings after a short bout with painkiller addiction. But she had decided she wasn't a drug addict and didn't need it. Then she admits that she's only known the other roommate for a month and a half. Red flags all over the place. Why would an LA native need to find strangers to live with her on CL? Why the oversharing about drugs and family? Why had she never had a positive roommate experience? But I pushed it all aside, giving this girl the benefit of the doubt. A few weeks go by in the house and all's well. I forget she ever seemed off, and we start becoming close. Then she takes me on a tour of LA for a day and proceeds to tell me her entire disturbing life story. When I say we had gotten close, by no means were we close enough to make this appropriate. She tells me about her stepfather molesting her, getting sent to a mental hospital when she told on him because he's a doctor and said she was criminally insane, getting raped by a lesbian at the hospital and beaten by the guards, attempting suicide, her mother's severe narcotic addiction, her ex-fiancé having a psychotic break and trying to kill her, her struggles with a chronic kidney illness that required many surgeries, her recent long-term boyfriend disappearing under mysterious circumstances. The horrific stories just went on and on and on. It sounded like something from a movie, and a part of me questioned if it could all possibly be true. But again, I give her the benefit of the doubt. Again, things go fine for a while, and my doubts about her subside. Then my food starts disappearing. I ask both girls about it privately, and Evan claims that the other girl, Juliana, had confessed to her that she was a compulsive overeater. Naturally, Juliana claims to be innocent. I side with Evan, and we start mildly bullying Juliana to try to get her to admit to stealing the food. Then dishes start piling up in the sink and nobody is washing them except me. I ask both girls, and again Evan swears on her life that it's Jules. Finally, Jules has had enough. It turns out she's been eating out every meal. We all had extremely different schedules, and Evan lied to my face about the dish and the food. When confronted, Evan starts crying and saying, "How could you accuse me of such things? I'm a good person. I'm a good person," and we end up apologizing to her in the end. Finally, the tension builds between the two girls due to many repeats of this situation, and one night, when I'm at work, they start fighting. Evan calls me saying Juliana hit her, and she's afraid for her life. I call Jules and tell her to find a new place to live. Juliana goes to stay with friends, and within a week moves out. Now things get really weird. Evan moves out of the master bedroom and starts sleeping in the living room every night. After I repeatedly request that she return to living in her bedroom, she tearfully confesses that she's been on high-dose opiates this whole time and is trying to wean herself off, but it makes her too weak to walk downstairs to her room. Feeling sorry for her, I end up babysitting her for weeks while she withdraws. It was both terrifying and disgusting, but I really wanted to help her out. During this time I see her naked and realize that she has NO scars from her repeated surgeries. Beyond that, she confides in me that she hasn't been working at all this entire time, but going out to score drugs and get high every day, and now she's flat broke. She apologizes for lying, saying over and over that she's a sick addict and just needs help. I get her into AA and NA as soon as she's able to walk, driving her daily to meetings and holding her hand the whole time. My longtime boyfriend and her oldest friend move in with us a short while later to help with bills. That's when it all goes from bad to unbearable. Evan goes to visit her mom one night and disappears for a week, returning very clearly high and claiming to be sober. She then starts going on many trips to visit friends in other states and is rarely home. When she is home, she babbles endlessly about how great sobriety is and how she's finally healing, while clearly nodding out on opiates. I end up finding something suspicious on her computer, and she admits to me that she's been working as a call girl and bringing customers to the house. I tell her she has to stop, and she claims she already has. Around this time, she becomes very physically ill. Finally, I get a phone call from her after another absence. She's hysterical. She's, get this, 6 months pregnant. She didn't know because she was so high. The baby was severely malformed, and there was no way of carrying to term. I comforted her, thinking that this trauma outweighed all the weird behaviors she exhibited. She had the procedure, and afterwards disappeared for almost a month. I thought at one point that she was dead until she texted me asking if her cat was okay. When she returned, she proceeded to start eating all of our food, using all of our toiletries, sleeping on the couch, and smoking inside the house, which was not okay with us at all. She was also very clearly on drugs. At first we tried to be nice about it, but she lied and lied, even going so far as to say her room was haunted and the ghost made her sleep upstairs. Finally, my boyfriend snaps and yells at her. She calls the cops and claims he assaulted her. They didn't believe her, but the other roommate did. Then one night, when I'm at work, she uses pity and sweet talking to convince my BF that we should all be friends again. I told him it was a lie, and he didn't believe me. When I get home from work that same night, my room is trashed. I asked if he did it, and of course he didn't. She'd been in there looking for cash or drugs, which I don't do. When I asked her about it, she looked me straight in the eyes and said it was the ghost. After that, she started sending me insane emails claiming that I had been her best friend and had betrayed her, accusing her of heinous crimes, and even convincing her she was a drug addict as a form of sick psychological torture. The emails get increasingly intense, becoming 10 to 20-page diatribes about how she didn't feel safe in her own home, and how I was the embodiment of pure evil, that my only purpose in life was to torment her. In these emails, she claimed that she used drugs on rare occasion, and that I had made up everything about her problem, that I had been verbally abusive about her abortion, and that we had repeatedly physically assaulted her. We were genuinely afraid for our safety, especially after the police showed up one day and took her in for a mysterious psychiatric hold. We never found out why she was carried out of the house, barefoot and handcuffed, by 4 LAPD officers. After that, we just tried to avoid her, but she got the other roommate involved. She even went so far as to claim she had pneumonia from the stress of living with us and our constant abuse. The emails continued to escalate. At one point, she said that I had been a sister to her until the evil spirit in me had forced me to abuse her. This was when I realized that her definition of abuse was a bit skewed, and all her stories about her childhood, exes, old roommates, and even Juliana had been complete fabrications. Of course, she didn't have scars from the surgeries. Everything she said was a lie to garner sympathy, so she could take advantage of people. Now I realized, of course, that she was completely mad. We found a new house, and the night before moving out, I hacked into her email. Come to find out, she had been telling our landlord that we were heinous criminals, telling her parents that she had been fired from a job because of me and needed money, all kinds of lies. Also, we come to find out that the guy who got her pregnant didn't mysteriously disappear. He ran away because they slept together once and she started stalking him. Obviously, everything she had ever said was a creepy lie. After moving out, the harassing emails and texts continued to the point that I had to have her blocked on both, and seriously considered getting a restraining order. This was 2 years ago. Last month we found out that this girl who claimed to have never been a drug addict, and that I made all of it up, had died of an OD. She was evil. This wasn't a situation where nobody tried to help a sick person. Everyone around her tried to help her, and she manipulated and used them. I don't feel sad that she's gone. In fact, I still want to punch her in the face. Story 3. Okay, so here goes. In early 2014, I was 18 years old and started browsing the world of Craigslist. I responded to an ad in the personal section and started texting this woman. Now, being 18, unfamiliar with how Craigslist works, I didn't see an issue with her meeting up at a red roof. I also didn't see anything wrong with her asking for donations. Again, 18 and stupid, I figured donation meant optional. Again, stupid, I know, but just to be clear, she never gave me a price, nor did I tell her I had money for her. So I set up a time to meet her. I left my house to head to my GED class as usual, but walked to Red Roof instead. It was pouring rain, and it was warm out, so by the time I got there I was all drenched and sweaty. I knocked on the room door she was in, and she answered. Her attire should have alerted me, but let's say it again, 18 and stupid. She invited me in, and I asked to use the shower quick. So I get undressed in the bathroom and hop in the shower. She started taking off her top, and I told her, that's okay, I won't be long. So she goes and waits on the bed watching Steve Wilkos. I get out of the shower and wrap a towel around my waist. I came out of the bathroom, randy as a dog, looked at her and asked if she was ready. She sprawled out on the bed and says, donations are due up front. At this point, all the red flags that should have gone off did, as I realized the situation I was in. My face dropped as I faced the TV. I nervously told her that I didn't have any money. She got up and started screaming at me and threw my clothes and bag at me. I got dressed and actually apologized for wasting her time. So I leave her room and start heading back to my GED class. Before I was out of the parking lot, a guy in a green punch bug calls me over to him. I tried to ignore him and walk past until he shouted to get my attention. So I walk up to the driver's side of this guy's car, and he starts talking to me. Now this guy looked sketchy, and I just figured he was the woman's pimp. So he's talking to me with his left arm up on his door and his right arm down at his side, holding a fucking pistol. At this point, I'm almost certain I'm going to get shot. He says to me, so why would you come here knowing you don't have any money? I explained as calmly as I could that I wasn't aware of the situation. This guy pulls his fucking arm up a little to show me his gun and say, I have messages between you and her saying you had money for her. Now, like I said earlier, I never told this woman I had any money. So this guy decides to lower his gun and says to me, you're lucky you came to one of my girls. Other girls would have stabbed you with a broken crack pipe. I see you're pretty young, so I'll let you off with a warning this time. He then motioned me to be on my way. But you bet your ass I kept looking back to make sure I wasn't about to be shot from behind. Obviously, I never met up with anybody from Craigslist again. Story 4. My name is Corey. Not Corey or Corey. Corey, a usually feminine spelling of a name for a guy. Not that I mind much of what spelling, or so on, of what my parents gave me. A few years ago, I had just been let go from my first job out of college. It had been pretty good money, but the company went under, so I started applying to every job I could find, as you do. Indeed. Monster, even Craigslist. One Craigslist job in particular was based on the outskirts of the city I lived, but I was ready to take anything. The job in question was some basic data entry and assistant work. At least that had been what the job listing said. I thought it was on the up and up, however, because this was one of the few Craigslist postings that had a website attached to it. It was a pretty basic website in retrospect, but the company message seemed to make it sound like they were heavily about serving the city and facilitating volunteer work. Within minutes of applying, I got a response inviting me for an interview that same day, though it titled me as a Miss Corey. I was going to respond to correct them, but it read that it was an automated response, so there would be no one to read it. I figured I'd just have to correct them once I got there, and again, didn't seem like a big deal. I'd gotten this once or twice before. I drove to the location the company website was listed, and it didn't seem too out of the ordinary. It was the second floor of a small building that was sandwiched in between a pawn shop and a phone store. I didn't think too much of it because this was a big city, and even if this on the outskirts of the city, a job was a job. I looked up to the second floor of the outside and saw someone looking down at me. I couldn't make out the face, but it was a person. That much I'm sure of. I went inside of the building and took the elevator up to the second floor and didn't find a single soul. It looked like a half-finished office floor from what I remember, with some doors opened and some locked shut, but there was simply no one to speak to, no one to inform that I was here. There was one cubicle, but one of the detachable walls had been left in another office room. There was a computer monitor in one room, but no desktop attached to it, a half-finished company banner, and a bookcase. On closer inspection of the bookcase, all the books weren't books at all, but a cardboard printing of a bunch of books stacked together. I finally had too much and called the phone number that had been on the website, but I heard no phone ringing from where I stood. More so, the phone I called seemed to cut my call off after a ring and a half, sending me straight to voicemail. Sufficiently creeped out by now, or wondering if I had stumbled on something I shouldn't have, I took the elevator down. As the elevator's door closed, I heard someone muttering angrily. I thought that was a girl's name. I didn't want to stay to find out who said it. Instead, I walked right back to my car and drove back home, not even daring to look back up at the window of the floor I was sure I had been scheduled for. That very evening, out of morbid curiosity, I checked Craigslist. The posting was gone. I looked for the website. It has been disabled. To this day, I still wonder, what or who did I stumble on? My greatest regret is not calling the police about this. Story 5. This happened about a year ago now. I am a college student, and I was basically forced to move out on my own, which I didn't mind, but that meant finding a new roommate, which can be a daunting and scary experience. I've had a few weird encounters, but I think this one takes the cake. I posted on Craigslist looking for a bedroom in a shared house or apartment for $300 or less, and on my ad I mentioned, please no phone calls, only texts or email, because I find being on the phone with someone I haven't had a chance to size up a really uncomfortable situation. I'm just awkward, I guess. Anyway, I got a call from a dude who clearly didn't read the no calls part, which I mentioned because this type of phone call was exactly the reason I don't like to talk to strangers on the phone. At first he was just pleasant and normal, told me he had a room available and relevant information like that. We started to talk about when and where we'd meet, and he started going on tangents about random stuff. I'm a combination of too interested in deep conversation and too awkward to end the call when it started to get weird. So this call went on for 2 hours, and we talked about the meaning of life and all kinds of weird shit. Honestly, this should have been the red flag, and I shouldn't have met him, and of course I also should have grown a pair and told him I needed to leave. So he wants me to meet him at his place and show me the room. I've since learned that you should really insist on meeting in public first. I got to his neighborhood, and it was run down on a level that made the ghetto I grew up in look nice. Sagged front porches, hot cracked concrete, sad people with old beat-up Lincolns. You get the picture. His house blended right in. The yard was seriously overgrown, and the front door didn't work. So I went around the back, and just looking at the guy standing in the doorway and seeing the kitchen behind him was enough to make me realize I really just wanted to leave. No way in hell. The guy in the doorway was a man with a sort of clown-style afro. He was leaning on a cane on his right side, his eyes looked crazy, and the house smelled musty from 10 feet away. Again, I'm a coward, so instead of trusting my gut, I go inside and I'm polite thinking it's okay. It'll be over in 20 minutes, and I can get the fuck out. I don't know what made me think this man, who had a 2-hour conversation with me on the phone about life and philosophy, would let me get away that easily. He took me up a flight of creaky steps into a small bedroom with no door and a mattress on the floor. I thought no way in hell would I live with a 40-something man. I was 19 and female, and no door on my bedroom, but it was a moot point because my mind was made up before I even saw the room. I wouldn't have lived there for free, let alone for $200 a month. Things got weird. He tried to hold me hostage with conversation again. I think he was lonely. He talked about how some of his family were millionaires. He might have been delusional. The whole story seemed made up. Then he told me about an 18-year-old girl that has also checked out the room and tried to fuck him, and told me about how his mom hated white people. He was black, I was white, and it sounded like he sympathized with her. Obviously, that was super uncomfortable. Eventually, I was able to find a break in conversation and plucked up the courage to make up an excuse to leave. I was never so happy to leave a place in my life. I don't know that he was necessarily a rapist or anything, but he really gave me the fucking creeps.